Hello, ako si Rambo Talabong at nanonood kayo ngayon ng Rappler Talk. Ngayong araw ang ika-4 na anibersaryo ng paglantad ng CHR sa secret jail cell sa Manila City. Ngayong araw din lang naglabas ng storya ang Rappler kung saan ang ombudsman ay kinlear ang pulis dito sa kasong ito. Ngayong araw kasama natin ang spokesperson ng CHR, si Attorney Jacqueline Digia. Attorney, welcome to our program.
It's a pleasure to be in the program, Rambo, and to our televiewers and listeners. Magandang umaga.
Okay. Attorney Jackie, anong reaksyon ng CHR dito sa pag-clear ng ombudsman sa mga policemen dito sa Raxabago Police Station sa kanilang pag-keep ng secret jail cell kung saan talagang na-crack yung mga tao. Nag-viral talaga yung mga pictures na ito noong 2017. Mahirap palimutan. At parang hirap isipin kung bakit sila na-dismiss. Pero ito na-dismiss. Anong reaction nyo?
Nakakalungkot basically, and very discouraging. We do know that we really have a serious problem when it comes to our detention facilities here in the Philippines. And when news broke out about this secret detention cell, it called attention to the plight of many persons deprived of liberty, as well as some irregularities being committed by our police. And kung tatandaan natin, meron na tayong isang batas, yan yung Anti-Torture Act. Kaya lang basically, very negligible yung naging impact ng batas na ito when it comes to implementation. Since it was implemented, we only had one conviction since then. And torture in itself, as well as the cruel and inhumane degrading treatments and conditions in our jails remain to be a valid problem. And therefore, we would have expected that this case will bring much needed attention to the plight of the PDLs and in the condition of the jails. And very important, to send a message that will hold the perpetrators accountable sana.
And Attorney Jackie, were you surprised by this? Were you confident with the case? Talagang kampante kayo sa kaso na final nyo in the first place para magulat ngayon dito sa nangyari?
Yes, we were very surprised. We knew we had a strong case. First of all, there was a video. It was submitted to the ombudsman. We were also able to get the affidavits of the victims. There was in fact an admission from the chief of police himself. And even our investigating team, consisting of lawyers and investigators, executed affidavits. And ang taas ng aming expectation that this would merit much needed attention from the ombudsman and from the courts of justice, and that it will send ultimately a strong message.
Attorney Jackie, could you just remind our viewers, ano yung mga kaso na i-final nyo, mga complaints na final nyo sa pulis, ano yung mga pagkakamali, paglabag sa batas na inakusan nyo sa kanila?
Well, una sa lahat, pinagbabawal ang secret detention cell. Meron talaga tayo mga established detention facilities all over the Philippines. And our penal system happens to be one of the most complex, if I may mention, because there are actually several agencies supervising detention facilities. We have those under the BGMP, we have those under the NDP, tapos we have also those under provincial governments, and then we also have those under the Philippine National Police. And very interestingly, sinasabi na ang mga detention facilities sa PNP ay temporary lock-up cells because they're only supposed to stay there for a very short period of time. 36 hours lang dapat yung maximum period na ilagay nila doon depending on the nature of the crime. Under the Anti-Torture Act, they are supposed that conforms to the Mandela rules. Dito sa kasong ito, it was deemed as a secret detention facility because it was hidden under an aparador. That's not necessarily the expectation one would have of a detention facility. A detention facility has bars purposefully for transparency because you want to find out what is happening behind those bars. And usually you would also have these detention facilities in a prescribed place within the police station. And it's noteworthy to mention that in previous occasions where the CHR visited that police station, hindi known sa amin yung specific detention facility na iyon, yung
Mhm.
sinasabi nating secret detention facility. It was another temporary lockup cell which we used to visit because we have a visitorial mandate, and every year we endeavor to visit all places of detention. And hindi namin alam yun. So in itself, so in itself, that was a secret detention facility sa
Mhm.
CHR. And hindi yun submitted. Kasi again, under the Anti-Torture Act, there's a strict requirement that all detention authorities must submit to us all the list of all detention facilities under their control, including the list of the detainees under their custody. And during that time, there was no submission at all. And that in itself makes it secret, the very nature of those facilities.
Mhm. At Attorney Jackie, meron din kayong akusasyon na merong extortion, merong torture na nangyari sa loob ng secret cell. Ano
That's
yung
right.
inyong evidence dito?
Those arrested, yes, those arrested were never charged. That in itself is a very serious violation, no? That's found in the revised penal code. Pangalawa, the victims executed affidavits where they allege that ill acts were committed against them. Among it are extortion, together with torture. Tapos in itself, the deplorable condition of the secret detention cell can actually be deemed as cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment. Because under RA 9745, it's very clear. If it does not fall under torture, but it's deplorable, it causes pain, suffering, or ridicule, then it can constitute CIDP. And very clearly, the fact that it was crowded, that they did not have access to hygienic services or facilities, I must say, in itself are indications of CIDP.
Mhm. Attorney Jackie, ang isang main rationale ng ombudsman for dismissing the complaint of the CHR against the police ay good faith daw. Wala daw bad faith ang police sa kanilang ginawa. Actually, parang parang naging mapamaraan pa ang police dahil puno na daw yung kanilang detention facility na main. Kaya ginamit nila itong secret jail cell para ilagay doon yung ibang tao dahil siksikan na yung mga tao. Ano masasabi niyo doon?
Well, una sa lahat, it is the state's obligation to ensure that we have adequate number of detention facilities. In fact, that was already brought to our attention in the previous processes before the United Nations and under the Convention Against Torture when we were being reviewed, no? And that's the reason why one of the recommendations was for us, for the Philippine government to operationalize and establish a national preventive mechanism. Kasi a national preventive mechanism will ensure that there is torture prevention. And torture happens when you don't have, as I mentioned a while ago, torture happens, or its lesser degree of torture considered as CIDT happens when you don't have adequate number of facilities and when you have deplorable conditions in those detention facilities. Now, importante doon, and I always want to emphasize, it's the obligation of the state. It's a function of the state to allocate sufficient resources in this regard. And lahat ng mga detention facilities natin under the Philippine National Police, dapat mag-conform sa standards na iyan. And doon sa kanilang model police stations, dapat merong sufficient provision for a detention facility. Hindi good faith ngayon na meron kang isang detention facility na nakatago sa likod ng aparador. That's not normal, di ba? And as I mentioned, it would have been good faith if they declared it to the CHR, but there was no declaration or submission that would make it regular. And the fact that these prisoners were denied access to remedies because they weren't properly charged, diba? In itself, that's a very grave offense because if you're not charged, then you don't know the nature of the accusation against you, and you will not have a legal remedy. You cannot post bail because you're not under the jurisdiction of the courts even. And they weren't given access to their family. So their existence was actually in secret. And that facility was not known to the public nor to the CHR, which again makes it secret. So you cannot say that it's really in good faith. Although we respect, of course, the ombudsman, and that's the reason why we have submitted a motion for reconsideration. We're just explaining the facts of the case that from based on our perspective makes it a secret detention cell.
Attorney Jackie, could you explain more about the MR that you filed? What are the things that you want the ombudsman to reconsider? Ano yung inyong convincing points dito para baguhin niya ang desisyon niya?
Dun sa MR na final ng komisyon, we emphasize there that the mere existence of the secret detention cell is itself a blatant violation of RA 9745. There is no other better evidence but the video itself, which will show that it was secret, it was clearly hidden from the public, and then there were affidavits executed by the victims as well as by the members of our composite team. And more importantly, there was an admission also from the chief of police. So those are clear indications already that by itself, by and large, that detention facility is a secret detention facility, and it's a violation of RA 9745. And aside from the secret detention facility, they must not also discount other blatant violations of the law, such as the failure to file charges against the victims, the allegations of extortion, as well as the allegations of torture. And while they have said that the burden rests upon us, we have given sufficient documentary proof to that regard. We have submitted affidavits, and we have also engaged with the ombudsman in our reply affidavit.
And Attorney Jackie, pressing point din dito, Attorney Jackie, yung pag-retract ng mga witnesses sa kanilang statements. How does the CHR address that?
You know, everyone must understand the plight of persons deprived of liberty. Imagine yourself under the custody of police and you have experienced an act of torture or CIDT. While under custody, you are under fear because basically you are still deprived of liberty. You're still effectively under their control. And their mere presence or your mere presence in the detention facility produces that fear. And therefore, it's very unnatural and difficult to expect from persons deprived of liberty to complain of torture. That's one. So, actually, under RA 9745, the government has the responsibility to extend institutional protection kasi nga by the very nature of the offense, alam ng batas na under sa custody ka ng person in authority, one who wields power, one who has a weapon, one who is part of the government. Therefore, ordinary people are intimidated. They're afraid. And so it's common that they have hesitations in filing cases, and there's a tendency of flip-flopping or retracting. It's also not uncommon for many victims to be approached by alleged perpetrators para maareglo. Kasi nga, minsan kinakausap sila, and of course, again, we have to understand the victims. They are less fortunate in life. Therefore, they would also like to live in relative peace, no? Kasi the legal process is a very tedious one. It's very intimidating also for many. Many are not acquainted with the legal process. It's also very demanding on them because it will entail a lot of commitment on their part, and it will take a long period of time. So, minsan napaghihinaan din ng loob after a while kasi kapag nag-file ka ng kaso tapos makapangyarihan yung kinakalaban mo, you cannot go back to your house. You cannot go back to earn your living once again. you're thinking about your family's plight. So there's a tendency to change mind because of fear. And this has been taken into consideration by the law. And that is why it required the government to extend institutional protection. But based on my experience, there has been a gap in this regard. If you ask other agencies, there's really no protection given, especially if the alleged perpetrators are part of government itself.
Attorney Jackie, isa pang concern doon sa resolution ng ombudsman is meron daw separate na ingress-egress. So hindi lang daw yung bookshelf na tumatakip doon sa secret jail cell, yung labasan, pasukan. Meron pang separate na entrance at exit. Kaya hindi daw to secret. Ano masasabi niyo doon? At ano ba ang pinapakita ng mga evidence na inyo nakita at nakuha?
It may not be secret to them because they know the exit and the ingress, no? But the question here is it known to the public? Is it known to the CHR? Which under the law is required to have knowledge of all the detention facilities. When we previously visited those detention facilities, did they also give us access to those facilities that would imply good faith? No, it wasn't. So, the fact that it has another entrance or exit is of no moment. The fact that they were not given access to the relatives, it was not known. They were not charged. Their existence there was only known to themselves. That makes it secret.
Jackie, we're wrapping up my last two questions. Second to the last now is, bakit mahalagang malaman ng mga Pilipino itong kaso to? Bakit mahalagang intindihin ng mga Pilipino itong kaso ito, itong pag-dismiss sa kasong to, itong pagsubaybay sa kasong ito, itong secret jail cell sa Manila?
You know, Rambo, ang laki ng stake ng bawat isa dito sa usapin na ito. There used to be a time when an ordinary citizen can just shrug off his or her shoulder and say, I don't care about our detention facilities. It won't happen to me. But this pandemic showed us that anyone is vulnerable. The fact that you went out and violated quarantine regulations, for example, can already land you in jail. And when you land in jail, you want to make sure that your health and your safety is taken into consideration and is paramount. You want to make sure that the conditions are well. You want to make sure that you will have access to remedies, that there won't be irregularities committed while in detention facility, that your rights will still be protected because you are still deemed innocent and you are still presumed innocent until proven guilty in courts. Now, napakalaki nung impact ng pagsisiwalat tungkol dito sa mga ganitong klase ng detention facilities para mahikayat yung ating mga otoridad na siguraduhin maayos yung kondisyon at pagpapatakbo ng ating mga detention facilities. Pangalawa, para masigurado na kahit sino man, kapag napasailalim sa mga ganitong mekanismo, ay mapoprotektahan pa rin ang kanilang mga karapatan at hindi mailalagay sa alanganin yung kanilang kalusugan, yung kanilang safety. And ang laki rin ng mensahe nito when it comes to justice. Kailangan kasi persons are held to account. Kailangan magkaroon ng pananagutan so that it sends a strong message, so that it will discourage bad behavior in the future. Kasi that's the purpose of why we file cases. It's not really because we want to put down people or we want to put down the authorities. It's not. At the end of the day, we want reforms because ultimately we want the public to have higher trust and faith in the justice system and in our local authorities, including the police and our jail custodian authorities. Kasi napakaganda, napakainam kapag yung mga mekanismo na ito ay napapakita natin na gumagana para nagkakaroon ng pagsuporta sa pamahalaan.
Huling katanungan po, Attorney Jackie. Ano ang mensahe nyo at saka siguro abiso, advice nyo sa mga tao na gustong tumulong sa paglalaban sa human rights para siguro wala ring secret jail sa kanilang sa kanilang mga lokalidad, alam nilang maayos ang pagtrato sa mga tao na kadating kasi ang laking problema talaga ng detention system dito sa ating bansa, ng ating justice system. Saan sila magsisimula? Anong dapat gawin?
Well, napaka-importante muna na pahalagahan natin yung mga karapatan natin, no? And when we talk about rights, it's a very beautiful concept. We need it to exist as human beings. There won't be meaning to our life if there are no human rights. It brings us purpose, it brings us meaning. After that recognition, it's very important that we are acquainted with our rights. Let's know our rights. Let's educate ourselves about our rights. The beauty about human rights is that it is legal. It's not an ideology. It's not a mere belief. Um, it's founded in the law. So the Constitution guarantees the exercise of our rights. That having been said, after acquainting and educating ourselves about our rights, it's very important now to stand up for our own rights and for the rights of others. Napaka-importante yung pakikipagkapwa. Napaka-importante that we remain vigilant. When we are aware of our rights and when we exercise our rights and when we fight for our rights, it sends a strong message that we give value to it and that we want better governance in exchange for those rights. And that's all about the social contract theory, which we have, no? That's the reason why we want to ensure that our rights are protected. So napaka-importante talaga na be aware, educate ourselves, and stand up for our rights and stand up for other people's rights.
Attorney Jacqueline Maria of the Commission on Human Rights. Maraming salamat sa pagsama sa aming programa. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Rambo, and stay safe. Mabuhay ka.